Do you ever start taking everything off of your bookshelves with the full intention of doing a full reorganization, and then as soon as you've taken almost the last thing off, you realize you have lost all interest or energy in doing it? And you don't even have the energy to put all the objects back on it again? Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today I want to talk to you about the books that I read in the month of April. Finally. So over the course of April I ended up reading 5 books, and let's just get into chit-chatting about them. The first book I read was Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is the 3rd book in the Nevermore series, which takes place in the fantastical world of Nevermore. And in this installment, there has been a mysterious illness that has swept across Nevermore and is affecting all of the Wunimals, which are animals who are basically affected by wonder, which is the magic of the world, and it gives them like a certain level of sentience, intelligence. They talk, they, you know, act more human than animal basically in this world. So yeah, this illness has swept through and is affecting them greatly. So that's what's kind of going on in this book. I don't want to talk too much about it overall because it is, of course, the 3rd book in a series. But yeah, this was amazing. I absolutely loved this book. I was so excited about it. I could barely put it down. Like, I barely wanted to put it down to do like anything whilst I was reading this. It is fantastical, continues expanding this like delightful world that Jessica Townsend has created. It fleshes it out a little more. We got a little bit more about the history of Nevermore and the Wondrous Society. We got a little more about the characters and delving into kind of how things work in this society. I may have cried at a few points. I may have also screamed at a few points. I really loved it, and I really loved learning more about this world. And at this point I can honestly say this series has, even though it's still like ongoing, at this point I can say that this series has pretty much just about surpassed Harry Potter in my love and admiration of a fantastical world and desperately wanting to be a part of that fantastical world. Like, I loved this. I'm so very excited to read the next book whenever it comes out. Trust me, I looked it up as soon as I finished reading it, and I know that there's going to be at least 6 books in the series, maybe more, but there's been no discussion so far, it looks like, as to title or what it's about or when it's coming out. So, but yeah, I'm very jazzed about this. Loved this. Hard-hitting stuff though, like the illness, like the timing of this mysterious illness like book was something. The timing of some not so nice bigotry and stuff that occurs because of the nature of the disease. Also, timing, like, for real. Like, it's very timely for a fantastical novel at the moment. But the quote that I think, I won't say it's like my absolute favorite quote, because there's a lot of quotes in here that I really loved, but I will say it's one that really stuck with me, and it's actually one that I kind of screamed when I read it, because I was like, wow, that's just and it was in a particular scene in this book, and it is, "We don't ignore bigotry, Jack," said Fenestra. "That's how cowardly bigots turn into brave bigots." And I just, like, ah! Anyway, loved this. Can't wait until the next one comes out. Give this 5 stars. The next book I read was How to Catch a Queen. This is by Alyssa Cole, and it is the first book in the Runaway Royals series, which is like an offshoot of the Reluctant Royals series that you probably heard me talk a lot about last year. So this follows Shanti, who has always wanted to be a queen. She has been training for this practically her whole life. Her new husband, King Sooooo, is very bound by the societal expectations of what a good leader is supposed to be, which basically is like not showing much emotion other than maybe anger. So though they are initially very attracted to each other, overall his country feels that she is still an outsider and they don't need her help, they don't want her opinion at all. When turmoil ends up striking, Shanti goes on the run, and Sooooo has to decide if he can be a good husband and partner to her, as well as the leader that his country needs. The romance that developed between these two was just, it was pretty wonderful to watch develop over the course of the story. Neither of the characters were really looking for love. Sooooo has been kind of trained that royal wives are not really worth much. They're not, they don't really stick around that long, and none of them are really what a true queen should be. So he's not really looking for nor expecting any kind of real connection, and Shanti is not really expecting love connection either. She wants to be queen because she wants to affect change in the world, she wants to be able to help people, and she feels that this is a way to do that properly, is to gain power and privilege and use that for good. She has not really been expecting to fall in love either. She is just hoping for a good partner who she can support and who will support her, and they can help again make better change in the world. So having these two people who were not expecting it all kind of develop that, it's very sweet. It's very sweet, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. I do have to say the first love scene was a bit on the cheesy side. That was a lot, but the other following ones are pretty steamy, so that's a pretty good balance for a romance novel, I think. Just a little bit of cheese and then a whole lot of steam, you know. I will say that the book overall did kind of drag until about maybe halfway through, and then things really started like picking up and action was getting greater. But still, very, just a very good story, very good romance, real funny bits. It really went hard into the tougher topics. Like, I mean, that was also brought up in her Reluctant Royal series as well. Those are also dealt with, but it was like really getting into it in this book. Just diving into, really diving into some shit. What is true strength? What does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to be a good leader? What does it mean to be a good man, you know, dealing with the patriarchal crap, and like can men show emotions and still be a, you know, like shit like that. It also really goes into societal expectations, of what a leader should be, familial expectations, and how tough that can be sometimes to try to live up to that, while at the same time still being like you. Also talks about, you know, abuse, especially by those whom you love and respect, addresses misogyny, the erasure of history and culture, talks a lot about partnership, basically what a good partnership, what a good like marriage partnership would be. So it really does, besides just being a romance novel, it really also covers these like intense topics. So overall, just really good. I don't think I quite enjoyed this one as much as I liked the Reluctant Royal series, but I did really like the characters. I really came to love them over the course of the book, and I am pretty excited to see where else, you know, this series goes overall. Especially since I think the second book either just came out or is just coming out. So yeah, overall I gave this 4 stars. The next book I read was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is all about orphaned Mary, who grew up in India, and her family has been kind of just killed off by a wave of like cholera, and she has been sent to live in the English countryside at her curmudgeonly uncle's manor, which is like this big spooky house on the moor called Misselthwaite Manor. Mary has always been a bit of a spoiled, sickly little kid whose parents did not really want her, but in this house full of secrets and a magical moor and gardens, Mary ends up finding a whole new outlook on life. Overall, I found this book to be very delightful. I really liked the descriptions of nature, especially the descriptions of the moor, which, like, I've never been on a moor. I've seen images of it. I've seen it in like movies, especially when a great romantic hero is like striding across a misty moor at dawn, you know, shit like that. Like, that's what I know about moors. I didn't really know too much about the flora and fauna that actually exists on it. I figured it was just like this swampy whatever. I didn't really realize how much wildlife and plant life and everything that exists out there. So that was a nice thing to discover while I was reading this. Really, yeah, just really, really loved the beautiful, beautiful descriptions of being on the moor and being on the grounds of this manor, being within the secret garden. The way that Burnett writes, it really makes you feel like you were right there with the characters experiencing this story. It was just such a good experience to be reading this, especially when we had like the windows open. You can smell like, you know, the spring flowers while reading that. It was great. I also have to say, like, I really loved Dickon, who is one of the characters in here. He is a young boy who lives like down the other end of the moor. He's like off the grounds technically, or still kind of on the grounds. I'm not 100% sure what counts as the manor specifically, but anyway, he lives like right down from where the manor is, and he is basically kind of like an animal charmer in a manner of speaking. He can like understand the animals that just live around there and talk to them, and they're like friends with him, and he has like animals that he saves and has as like kind of pets, but also like not really pets, they're just kind of like friends. Like, he has a fox that he saved and it just follows him around like a dog, and I'm honestly like, this small little part of me that desperately wanted to be Ellie Mae Clampett as a child just fucking loves the idea of this. Is just love it. So as you can tell, Dickon was my favorite character. I really just enjoyed overall Dickon and the friendship that blooms between Dickon and Mary. As this takes place in Yorkshire, there is the Yorkshire dialect, which is brought up in here. I mean, I'm from the US, so I don't really know too much about, like, dialects and things like that in England, necessarily. Like, I know that Welsh is a separate thing. And I've heard it, like, spoken, because I've watched, like, various videos and stuff like that, and it sounds really freaking cool. I didn't really realize that there was, like, a different dialect that's also spoken in, like, Yorkshire. I know, I mean, I can tell the difference in accents, kind of where people probably are from in England, but I didn't realize that there was, like, a separate thing of that. So, because of this, and because I'm telling you my ignorance here, I'm not 100% sure if it is represented correctly within this novel. I'm not really sure if it's accurate, or if it is on the, like, verge of being offensive. So, yeah, not quite knowledgeable of that. If you were from there and you know better, let me know. But for right now, I'm gonna say I suppose it's accurate. Not 100% sure. If it's offensive, I am sorry. But yeah, I found that to be just a charming part of the story as well, especially as Mary makes efforts to relate to people more by picking it up and trying to talk to them in that dialect. I found that as a nice little growth point for her, because she is kind of a brat as it starts out and doesn't really care about people, but then over time she's like, this part of her wanting to relate more to others. I don't know. Speaking of kind of offensive things, so this is taking place at the time when Britain was still like a major super empire. So they kind of ruled India at the time, and this is a time period that I've probably spoken about it before, but I'm pretty ignorant of that everything in general, because while we do cover some world history in American schools, or at least in the schools I attended, we don't really go into, like, deep depths of a lot of everybody else's history. Like, we barely even skim the surface with our own. So, yeah, not very knowledgeable at all about that. I just know that they ruled there for a while, and then stuff happened, and then they were successfully kicked out. Like, Britain left, or are you guys on good terms? Like I said, I am entirely ignorant. Don't go for me for anything involving world history. I'm not the source for this. But this was written at that time. I believe it was written at that time. I know that it takes place during that time, and so there are some racist things that are kind of sprinkled in here. There's definitely some stereotyping that is sprinkled in here. It's not like a major part of the book, but it definitely shows up here and there, and that is, like, the one, like, major flaw really in what is otherwise a pretty decent story, is just that's, like, that shit ain't right. It ain't great. It ain't great, is all I'm saying. It could be worse, but it ain't great. Yeah. Okay, so on to characters, I guess. I didn't really know what to think about Mary at first when I was within, like, the first couple of chapters or so of this book. Usually if a kid is a major brat in a book, I kind of think about punting them across a room. But there are reasons that you kind of realize early on in the book and over time why Mary is the way she is. Her parents neglected her incredibly when she was a child. Like, there's a quote in here that's just basically straight up says that her mom didn't want anything to do with her, and she wasn't really supposed to be around her mom at all, and the poor thing just liked catching sight of her mom across, like, their yard or something at their house because she was so beautiful. But her mom didn't want it. Like, that's just like fucking heartbreaking. So yeah, her parents' neglect really kind of fucked her up a bit, and despite the fact that they didn't want anything to do with her and she was neglected, I mean, she was still, like, fed, she was taken care of by the servants in the house, but she was still basically given anything she wanted to shut her up, and that of course created a pretty spoiled, angry little girl. The parental neglect, or like the way that parents parent, or their lack of parenting, is really talked about a lot as the reason why kids are shitty. Her another little boy in here, Colin, is also kind of a shithead. But that's not really either of their faults necessarily. I mean, they shouldn't be like that, but if they don't know any better, and the way their parents treat them makes them in that manner. I feel like I'm not expressing this the way I want to, but what I mean to say is I really liked that this book, for an older book, really addressed the effect that adults can have on children's lives entirely. Like, their entire personalities and how they behave and everything. Like, you can fuck up really easily with kids. You can, like, fuck them up real bad because of your fucking behavior and your neglect or whatever the shit is that you got going on. And I don't know, I liked that was like something that's in here. I liked that was given as a reason for the behavior and as an explanation, and it wasn't just that all the kids just evil out of nowhere or something like that. It's like, no, they're not necessarily bad kids, it's just that's how they were treated by the people who are supposed to love and care about them the most. So of course they're going to turn out to be kind of shitty for a while until they're, like, actually loved and cared for, until they know better. I don't know, I thought that was a very good point to be making in here, and I found that refreshing for, again, an older book, because sometimes, I mean, I guess it depends on when it was written, but a lot of the times I think it's a very spare the rod, spoil the child kind of crap. You know, like, no matter what, the kid's the problem, and I don't know. So anyway, that's what I mean. I found that to be a very good point to make. That it's not just, they're not crap out of nowhere. Just people make you that way when you're in your young and formative years. I also really liked that it talked about the importance of getting fresh air, being outside, having, like, sunlight and fresh air, and being out among nature. It really talked about loving and experiencing nature and the flora and fauna, and really learning to appreciate it, you know, also respect it and respect animals, and just kind of, like, I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. I also really liked the character growth that happened over the course of the story. Not so much for Dickon because he is perfection already, but I mean like for Mary. I really liked watching her become like a better person over the course of the book. So that was pretty great. Overall, I did really enjoy it. Some not great things sprinkled in here and there, but the overall messaging in the book and the descriptions and the character growth, did enjoy that. I ultimately gave this 4 stars. Alright, now I'm going to talk a long time also about the next book that I read, which was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This follows orphaned Anne Shirley, who has lived in a few houses over the course of her short life, but she is hoping that maybe beautiful Green Gables and Avonlea and the Cuthberts might just be her forever home. But she was actually a mistake. She was supposed to be a boy that they were adopting to help Shy Matthew around the farm. So the question is, can Anne convince the no-nonsense Marilla that she will be a great addition to their lives? This was just absolutely delightful. I really loved this reread. I mentioned it before. I've read the first book a couple of times. I read the entire series. Like I said, I've read the first book a couple of times. I read the entire series once when I was in high school. This is my reread of it now as an adult. Fucking loved this. I absolutely loved it. The descriptions in here, again, of nature. It's a very wonderful spring book. It's beautiful. Everything is just so beautifully described. It reminded me of how much I really wanted to visit Prince Edward Island. Like, I forgot that I really freaking wanted to visit that as a kid, and it just reminded me of how beautiful this place sounds. I was actually looking up photographs of it after I finished reading this. Yeah, it just reminded me of how much I want to visit there, and Canada in general, actually. Anne, as a character, I found her to be pretty much the same as I felt about her as a younger person, which was that she's really overly dramatic and kind of a bit much. So honestly, I'm not sure if she's someone that I would have really wanted to hang out with too much when I was growing up, because I honestly probably would have found her to be exhausting. But looking at her as an adult, I can still kind of see her as being slightly exhausting, but she's also incredibly hilarious and imaginative. She appreciates the small wonders of life and the beauty in things, especially outdoor things. She has a temper that I'm 100% on board with, and I just really overall enjoy her optimism and her outlook on life in general. I think it's just great. I also read between the lines a little bit with some of her treatment before coming to Green Gables, and just really kind of fell for her at the same time. She does have some character growth, mostly just settling down just a little bit, not being quite as impulsive. She's still like impulsive, but not like as, as much as when she was 11. She's 11 at the start of this book, and she's about 15 at the end of it. 15, 16, something like that at the end of it. But I mean, like, we're not going to spend some time talking about Anne's character growth, because while she does have a little bit, largely, the person who has the most character growth over the course of this book is Marilla Cuthbert. She is absolutely no nonsense, but she is also incredibly kind. She's awkward as hell in a lot of this book. which makes her to be more gruff than she really could seem, but she doesn't really know how to deal with kids. I mean, how would you like to be like 50 something years old and all of a sudden you're raising a little girl out of nowhere and you don't really know how to raise kids, like, at all. She feels awkward as hell. She doesn't really know what she's doing, and that reflects in the way she words things sometimes, but she's not like a mean person. She is a kind-hearted person who doesn't always know how to express that, or doesn't want to do the wrong thing in bringing Anne up, essentially. She is able to find humor in things, especially in the shenanigans, and gets herself into, or the things that come flying out of her mouth sometimes. Over time, she really comes to fiercely love Anne, and I absolutely adore it. Like, I don't think I really noticed that as much as a kid, or appreciated as much as I was, like, younger and more relating to Anne in some way, but also just other characters around her age. But now that I'm like, I mean, I'm not like Marilla's age, obviously, but I mean, now that I'm into the other section of life, which is more moving towards motherly, I guess, I understand Marilla a little bit more, and I appreciate her as a character and the growth that happens to her over the book. I just love it. Matthew, wonderful. Love him. Gilbert. Let's talk about Gilbert just a little bit. Even though Gilbert is not in here that much, Gilbert Blythe is one of my book boyfriends, and I was reminded again of why he is one of my book boyfriends. I am excited to revisit him over the course of the volumes as well. Love him. You're going to hear me screech a lot more about him, I am sure, in the upcoming books. Diana, her best friend, very good friend. Also excited to see more of her over the course of the series as well, because I have completely forgotten Diana's part of the story at all. I remember, like, shenanigans that happen in here, and I remember that they're, like, bosom friends for, like, they're just bosom friends. But, I kind of forgot, like, how her life goes after school. So it'll be like experiencing it for the first time again, because I honestly, it just skips right out of my brain. The scrapes that Anne gets herself into, she calls them her scrapes. Dear God, it's just absolutely ridiculous. She just hilarious. I laughed a lot in here, just ridiculous things, because it reminded me of, like, just ridiculous shit that I did as a kid, or growing up hearing stories about ridiculous things that, like, my parents have done, or my aunts and uncles have done, and just some of the crazy things. Like, I don't even know. I don't want to say too much about it in case you want, like, surprises. If you wanted to read this book at all, which I highly recommend that you do. But it's great. There's a lot of humor and a lot of heart in this book. And now I'm probably just going to, like, read a bunch of quotes at you, or talk about a bunch of quotes, because I, like, notated down some that I just really freaking loved, and you can see I, like, made little markers for them. Some of them I just really liked, or I related to them. This one I definitely related to as a kid, and I just thought it was really funny. Marilla's telling her, you know, you gotta sit down and, like, pray, pretty much say your nightly prayers and stuff like that. So she's telling her, you gotta kneel down. Marilla says to Anne, you gotta kneel down, and here you go. So Anne does, and then she looks up at her and is like, why must people kneel down to pray? If If I really wanted to pray, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd go out into a great big field all alone and into the deep, deep woods, and I'd look up into the sky, up, 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 into that lovely blue sky that looks as if there was no end to its blueness, and then I'd just feel a prayer. Like, I don't know, I just related to that a whole lot, because that's very much how I felt when I was a kid. Like, I didn't understand, or still don't really feel like you should just make that happen like that, or you have to be a certain way, you have to kneel, or you have to be in church, or you have to be, like, that's something I very much related to as a kid. Like, if I don't feel like doing it then, why can't I just do it outside when I'm amongst all of nature's wonder or something? Like, you know. This is right after Anne has had her features insulted, and she's very sensitive about that already. She's very sensitive about her freckles and the color of her hair, which, girl, I am jealous of red hair because it is fucking beautiful, and I don't even like the shade of my own hair. I'm very excited to be dyeing my hair back to red at some point, God willing, when that can happen. So, but I get it. We each don't appreciate what we have. But anyway, she has been, had her looks insulted, and she's very angry and upset still. And she, like, Marilla's kind of chastising her for her reactions to having been insulted. And Anne just looks at her and says, "Imagine how you would feel if somebody told you to your face that you were skinny and ugly." And it says, "An old remembrance suddenly rose up before Marilla. She had been a very small child when she had heard one aunt say of her to another, 'What a pity she is such a dark, homely little thing.' Marilla was every day of 50 before the sting had gone out of that memory." And that's, like, I don't know, I think most people have had an experience of that. Really, just maybe overhearing something or having someone tell you directly that you're fucking ugly or something, and it just hurts, and especially hurts if it's from, like, a family member. It's very insulting, and you really take it to heart, especially when you're, like, young like that. And I don't know, I got that, and I also just, I related to it, and I also I liked that Marilla, like, that was an instance of her, like, connecting with Anne and kind of understanding, like, ooh, like, that kind of growth, like I said. Anne also just has some really great, very optimistic quotes she says overall. For example, "What a splendid day. Isn't it good just to be alive on a day like this? I pity the people who aren't born yet for missing it. They may have good days, of course, but they can never have this one." It's like, ugh. I'm so sorry for people who live in lands where there are no Mayflowers. And then something that really struck me with this, that I was, like, cringing really hard while I was reading this. And I'm not going to read, like, I'm going to summarize here for you. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long. But Anne has such a huge, crazy imagination, and her friends decide to, at one point, form a story club where they write stories, essentially, and read them to each other, and it's all very dramatic and ridiculous. So she starts off, it's called The Jealous Rival, or In Death Not Divided. Let's see. It's a sad, sweet story. I just cried like a child while I was writing it. It's about two beautiful maidens called Cordelia Montmorency and Geraldine Seymour, who lived in the same village and were devotedly attached to each other. Cordelia was a regal brunette with a coronet of midnight hair and duskly flashing eyes. Geraldine was a queenly blonde with hair like spun gold and velvety purple eyes. So It says, they grew in beauty side by side until they were 16. Then Bertram DeVere came to their native village and fell in love with the fair Geraldine. He saved her life when her horse ran away with her in a carriage and she fainted in his arms, and he carried her home 3 miles because, you understand, the carriage was all smashed up. So he proposes to her. Bertram went down on his knees. Geraldine accepted him in a speech a page long. I can tell you I took a lot of trouble with that speech. I rewrote it 5 times and I look upon it as my masterpiece. Bertram gave her a diamond ring and ruby necklace and told her they would go to Europe for a wedding tour, for he was immensely wealthy. But then, alas, shadows began to darken over their path. Cordelia was secretly in love with Bertram herself, and when Geraldine told her about the engagement, she was simply furious, especially when she saw the necklace and the diamond. All her affection for Geraldine turned to bitter hate, and she vowed she would never marry. And then it's just, she ends up, basically in a jealous rage, she ends up killing her friend, and then Bertram dives into to save her, and he dies too, and Cordelia's overcome with remorse and is put into an insane asylum. I thought that was a poetical retribution for her crime. It's just so overly dramatic and tragic, and I was cringing because of that, but I was also cringing because I remember, so she was about 13 at the time of the story club and writing that story. I was not 13 when I wrote something that was, I've written a lot of overly dramatic shit. Like, you should see half the poetry I wrote in high school. It's terrible. I was a little younger than that. I was about 11 or 12. And I wrote a short story of it was called The Deadly Love Triangle. And from what I remember, I can't find it now. I'm very disappointed that I can't find it now, because I viewed this as a child. I viewed this as my masterpiece. I'm pretty sure it's really bad, but I kind of wish I could see it so I could just be like laugh over it. But it was along the lines of those, except I think everyone died at the end of it. I don't know, but it was just like overly dramatic, overly sentimental bullshit, and it's just, I don't know, so I was cringing mostly, like a little bit because of how overly dramatic it was, but also mostly because I remembered writing like a similar kind of, maybe not quite as flowery and poetical, but a similar kind of thing as a young person, and just, I just, oh my god. But overall, as you can tell, I haven't really stopped smiling since I've been talking about this book. I fucking loved it. I loved this reread. It was delightful. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. I bawled my fucking eyes out towards the ending. I am currently in the middle of Anne of Avonlea and enjoying myself immensely. And, yeah, fucking love this book. Fucking recommend you read it. It's great. It's great. I give it 5 stars. Alright, now that I've rambled on forever about that, let's ramble just a little bit about the last book that I read in April, which was another book by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and this one was A Little Princess. So this is about Sarah Crewe, who loves her dad a lot. There's a couple of sentences in here that give me pause just a little bit because it's almost on the end of creepy relationship between the two. But I am also reading this as someone in 2021, so cultural context of the time is lost on me. So in reality it probably isn't as creepy as I'm thinking it sounds, but anyway. Moving on with the summary of the book. She loves her dad very much. He has recently dropped her off at Miss Minchin's select seminary for young ladies in England so she can get a proper education while her father stays in India, where he is working and managing business. They're quite well off, quite well off. So he is managing like businesses and money and stuff like that over there, and he's called Captain Crewe, so I think he's also in like the army something like that. Anyway, she's a very kind girl and has been treated kind of like a little princess. She's very spoiled, but unlike Mary, who was ultimately very bratty at the beginning of the book, Sarah's not really a brat. She's been given things in her life, but she's also very kind. She's very welcoming, friendly, and very generous as well. And since she has spent so much time, like, she's a bookworm, she devours fucking books like crazy. She's also very wise beyond her years. She's very kind of quiet, introspective, intelligent little kid. But she is at this school. She is treated like a star pupil because she is very intelligent, and she's also one of the wealthiest students at the school. So Miss Minchin, who's very much about the, she kind of parades her around like a trick pony, essentially. After tragedy strikes, however, and she has basically lost pretty much everything, Sarah is stripped of her finery and made to be a servant at the school instead, enduring a lot of cruelty from the staff, including especially Miss Minchin, and also some of the students. But they can't really keep this optimistic kid down. So, again, as with Secret Garden, there is a little bit of racism sprinkled in here. It's not as much as in The Secret Garden, but there's still just a smidgen. There's a smidgen within here. Mostly, though, it really talks about classism. Like, that's something that's brought up quite a lot about in here. Really big discussion on how servants are treated, especially child laborers. Really going into the plight that they can really have, and how terribly they can be treated. Also really talks about those who are poverty stricken. So I thought that was probably a good kind of discussion to be had around that, which is addressed a little bit in here. Not addressed, I don't think, as well potentially could be. It's almost like there's some messaging in here that almost seems like it's going on the sugarcoating side of things at times, but it is a book written for children, so I mean, you don't want all of the dirty details, really. When I was looking at Goodreads, I did see the argument that a lot of people had about why they didn't really like this was that they didn't really like Sarah. They thought that she was a bit of a Mary Sue, which, reflecting on that, I guess she can be kind of like a Mary Sue sometimes. People really like her, or, people don't like her, but they're bad people. Only the bad people hate her. She's really good at a lot of things, which she is. She's very smart, she's well-read, she's very kind, she's generous. She is fluent in French, really imaginative, tells wonderful stories, most people love her, but she's not really insufferable. Like, sometimes Mary Sue's their perfection can be annoying, but she is not really like that. She's not like an insufferable character. She's not a full perfectionist. She does have her flaws. She's not without them. She definitely has a mouth on her that she doesn't let off too much, but I enjoyed it greatly whenever she did. Honestly, I couldn't help but like her as I was reading this. Like, at times I was like, oh boy, she's just being too good, but at the same time, I just couldn't help it. I couldn't help but like her, and I couldn't help but root for her. She's a very interesting character. I only ever saw the movies, so I was a little bit surprised by certain scenes that took place in here, as well as the passing of time. I think in the movies it's only supposed to have been maybe like a few months or maybe a year or something like that since the beginning to the end. However, this takes place over several years. She arrives at the school when I think she's about 7, and I believe that by the time it ends she is 12 or 13, perhaps? 14 maybe? But I think maybe 12 or 13. Yeah. So it's been a few years. This book definitely made me cry. Like for real. Yeah, definitely, yeah, some of it definitely got to me in a big way. The conclusion, I will say, I did really like it. That's one of the things that made me cry, but like, I did really like it when I reflected on it a little bit after I had kind of put the book aside, moved on to other things. I did still find it nice, but almost saccharine in a way, or like there could be more to it. Like there could be more to it than what there was. However, I did still really think that it was a decent enough ending. I don't want to ruin anything for you in case you really want to read this book, so I won't like get more detailed than that, but if you've read it or you plan on reading after this, you'll probably understand what I'm talking about, perhaps. But overall, it was still just still really good. I did find it to be a very sweet story. I saw at one point where things were going, and it's been a while since I watched the movies, so and the last one I watched, like, it has literally been like probably a decade or so since I've seen the one that was made in the 90s. Like, I've only seen that one like once, and it was in the movie theater, so it's been a while. But the one I've seen like a lot more was the old one with Shirley Temple in it from like the 30s, and that's like, it goes off the rails from what this is, and is very different, because of course it is. But so yeah, there were parts in it that really surprised me and really got to me. But yeah, I overall found it to be a very sweet story, some wonderful quotes within here that I really loved, and yeah, I very much, again, really enjoyed the experience. I ended up giving this 5 stars. And that is it, folks, for everything that I read in the month of April. I think I did try to warn you in another video that I would probably talk for a long time about this, so I am very sorry for my rambling, but I overall had an amazing reading month. I just really, really enjoyed these books. Sorry I'm a little late getting this up to you, but I wanted to make a lot of good notes and try to really get my thoughts in order with these, because I had such a wonderful time reading each and every one of these. Despite the flaws that are within them, not all of them, but the flaws that are in some of them, I did really enjoy overall, and I so far I'm enjoying what I'm reading right now, and I'm hoping for another good month, mostly that I can talk to you about next month. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you're having a great weekend or week or wherever you are when you're watching this. Bye guys.